What if the loneliest you have ever felt wasn't when you were alone, but when you were standing right next to someone who was supposed to love you? What if the most dangerous relationship you've ever been in didn't leave bruises? It left silence? What if the person draining your joy isn't a stranger, isn't an enemy, but someone whose name is saved in your phone? Someone you've made excuses for, someone you've waited up for, someone you've shrunk yourself for, again and again and again? What if I told you that the reason you feel so exhausted, so unseen, so strangely hollow inside is not because something is wrong with you, but because someone has been quietly, consistently teaching you that you don't matter? And what if, starting today, you finally gave yourself permission to see it? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you are 8 warning signs that someone doesn't truly care about you. And by the end of this, you will not only be able to see them clearly, you will understand exactly what you deserve instead. What if the people closest to you have been quietly teaching you that your needs are too much? This is one of the most damaging patterns a person can experience, and it rarely looks like cruelty. It looks like sighs. It looks like someone checking their phone while you're crying. It looks like you always do this. When someone truly doesn't care about you, they communicate through micro-expressions, body language, impatience, and dismissal, that your emotions are inconvenient. Over time, you begin internalizing this message. You start shrinking. You start apologizing for existing, for feeling, for needing. You pre-edit yourself before speaking. You ask less. You expect less. And the tragedy is, you call this being low maintenance when it is actually self-abandonment. Genuine love never makes you feel like a bother. It makes you feel like a priority. The moment someone consistently makes you feel like your presence costs more than it's worth, that is your soul sending you a signal you must not ignore. What if the relationship you're fighting to keep alive only exists in their memory when they want something from you? This is called transactional care. And it is dressed up so cleverly in charm and nostalgia that most people miss it completely. You'll notice it when you trace the timeline. They call when they're lonely, text when they're bored, reach out when they need a favor, or reappear when their other options fall through. But during your darkest moments, during your hospital visits, your layoffs, your grief, they are mysteriously unavailable. They are going through something. They are really busy. They always have an excuse, and it always sounds almost reasonable. Almost. The truth is, people who genuinely care about you don't need to be in a crisis themselves to remember you exist. They show up in the ordinary moments. They check in without agenda. They text, "I was thinking about you," not because they need something, but because you crossed their mind and they valued that enough to say it out loud. What if someone in your life doesn't actually know who you are? Not because they forgot, but because they never truly asked. There is a profound difference between someone who listens and someone who simply waits for their turn to speak. People who don't genuinely care about you treat conversation as a performance. They nod. They make the right sounds. But the second there's a pause, they redirect it back to themselves, their stories, their problems, their opinions. They never ask follow-up questions. They don't remember what you told them last week. They confuse talking with connecting. Genuine care is curious. It leans forward. It says, "Wait, what happened after that?" It remembers the name of your boss, the outcome of your doctor's appointment, the status of that dream you mentioned 6 months ago. Being truly seen by someone, having your inner world honored as worth knowing, is one of the deepest forms of love. If someone has never genuinely asked about yours, that is an answer you didn't know you needed. What if the people who dismiss your suffering are the same ones who catalog your mistakes with perfect precision? This is a quietly devastating pattern. Someone who doesn't truly care about you will minimize your pain. It's not that serious. You're overreacting. Everyone goes through that, while simultaneously holding your failures under a magnifying glass. They remember every mistake you've ever made. They bring them back at precisely the moment you're most vulnerable. They are selective with empathy. They give it to strangers but withhold it from you. And this asymmetry, pain dismissed, flaws amplified, does something corrosive to the human spirit. It teaches you to be ashamed of needing comfort while simultaneously being ashamed of your imperfections. You end up in an impossible loop, too broken to deserve grace, too sensitive to be taken seriously. But here's the truth. The right people hold both your struggles and your stumbles with tenderness. They don't weaponize your worst moments. They witness them and stay anyway. What if someone only seems deeply invested in you when there's drama, but disappears the moment you need quiet, steady presence? Some people are conflict activated. They don't know how to connect through peace, so they manufacture chaos. Or they show up with enormous energy when there is something to argue about, something to win, something to perform. But ask them to simply sit with you in your grief, your confusion, your uncertainty, and they evaporate. This is a clear sign that their investment in the relationship is not about you. It is about stimulation. Real care shows up in the silence. It shows up in the Tuesday afternoon texts. It shows up in someone sitting beside you without needing to fix anything. It shows up in being chosen not during the fireworks, but during the long, quiet nights when there is nothing dramatic to offer, just your ordinary, aching, beautiful human self. If someone is only present when there's fire, they are not in love with you. They are in love with the heat. What if the guilt you feel for saying no was installed in you by someone who needed you to have no limits? Boundaries are not walls. They are not selfishness dressed up in therapy language. Boundaries are the clearest expression of self-respect a human being can offer. And the way someone responds to your boundaries tells you everything about whether they actually care about you. People who don't truly care will violate your boundaries repeatedly. And then, this is the part that breaks people. They will make you the villain for having set them. They call you cold. They call you difficult. They say you've changed, as if growing a spine is a character flaw. They guilt you. They pout. They reframe their disrespect as your cruelty. This is manipulation, and it works because love makes us doubt ourselves. But here's what I know to be true. Someone who loves you will be uncomfortable with your boundary and still honor it. That discomfort? That is what integrity looks like. That is care. What if the greatest act of courage in your life isn't climbing a mountain, isn't starting a business, isn't facing some external storm, but simply deciding that you are worth being loved well? That is where we begin. Because before we talk about other people, we have to talk about us, about what happens to a human being when they spend years giving their heart to someone who treats it carelessly. Something breaks, quietly, gradually. You stop trusting your own instincts. You start explaining away behavior that once would have horrified you. You say, they're just like that. And I know they care, they just don't show it. And maybe I'm asking for too much. You become a defense attorney for someone who keeps putting you on trial. And here's the painful truth. Most of us don't leave those relationships because we're foolish. We stay because we're faithful. We stay because we remember who that person used to be or who we believed they could become. We stay because love, real love, doesn't give up easily. But there is a difference, a devastatingly important difference, between love that is patient and love that has become a cage you've decorated to look like a home. So let's talk about the signs. Let's name what most people are too afraid to name. You know, this feeling. It's that moment when you go to share something that matters to you, something that hurts. And even before the words are fully out of your mouth, you can feel it. The shift. The subtle but unmistakable energy that says, this is too much. You are too much. They don't have to say it out loud. It lives in the sigh. It lives in the eyes that drift toward the phone. It lives in the way they change the subject just a beat too quickly, the way they offer solutions when all you needed was to be heard. And over time, this is the part that breaks my heart. Over time, you start doing the work for them. You start pre-editing yourself. You start filtering what you share, minimizing what you feel, swallowing what you need. Because you've been taught, not with words, but with 1,000 tiny moments, that your inner world is an inconvenience. I want to say something clearly. Genuine love does not make you feel like a bother. It makes you feel like a priority. The right people make room for your complexity. They don't make you earn the right to feel things. If someone consistently makes you feel like your presence costs more than it's worth, that is not love. That is management. And you were not put on this earth to be managed. This one is harder to see because it wears the face of friendship. They call. They reach out. They remember you exist. But when you trace the pattern, really trace it, you notice something. They always seem to appear when they're lonely, or when they need a favor, or when their other options have fallen through. But when you needed them? When you were sitting in a hospital waiting room at 2 in the morning, when you lost the job, when the relationship ended and you were lying on the bathroom floor, where were they? Mysteriously unavailable, going through something themselves, really busy. And somehow it always sounds almost reasonable. Almost. Here's what I know about people who truly care about you. They don't need a reason to reach out. They don't need you in order to think of you. They check in without an agenda. They text, "I was thinking about you," not because they want something, but because you crossed their mind and that felt worth saying. Transactional care is still a transaction, no matter how warmly it's packaged. And you deserve someone who shows up not because of what you can offer them, but because of who you simply are. There is a difference that most people feel but rarely name. The difference between someone who listens and someone who waits. Someone who waits makes the right sounds. They nod. They say, at the appropriate moments. But the second there is a pause in the conversation, they redirect it back to themselves, their stories, their drama, their opinions about your situation that are really just opportunities to talk about their own. They never ask follow-up questions. They don't remember what you told them last week. They haven't asked about the thing you were worried about, the appointment you were dreading, the dream you mentioned 6 months ago that you've been quietly carrying ever since. Being truly seen by another person, having your inner world treated as something worth knowing, is one of the most profound experiences a human being can have. It is a form of love that doesn't get talked about enough. And if there is someone in your life who has been present but never truly curious about you, if they know your face but not your fears, your name but not your story, that absence of interest is an answer. It's just an answer you didn't know you were waiting for. Pay attention to this pattern because it is quiet and it is cruel and it does enormous damage. Someone who doesn't truly care about you will look at your suffering and say, "You're overreacting." It's not that serious. Everyone goes through this. They shrink your pain. They make it smaller. They make you feel dramatic for having it. And then, sometimes in the same breath, they will hold your mistakes under a magnifying glass with perfect clarity. They remember everything you've done wrong, every failure, every moment of weakness, every time you fell short. And they bring those things back at precisely the moment when you are most vulnerable, most open, most in need of grace. This asymmetry, pain dismissed, flaws amplified, does something corrosive to the human spirit over time. It teaches you to be simultaneously ashamed of needing comfort and ashamed of your imperfections. You end up unable to receive care and unable to forgive yourself for needing it. But here is what real love looks like. It holds both your suffering and your stumbling with tenderness. It doesn't weaponize your worst moments. It witnesses them and stays anyway. You are not too broken to deserve that. You never were. Some people only know how to connect through chaos. Peace makes them restless. Stillness makes them uncomfortable. So they manufacture drama, or they disappear entirely from the quiet spaces of your life and only reappear with enormous energy when there is something to argue about, something to perform, something to win. But ask them to simply sit with you, to be present without an agenda, to hold space for your grief, your confusion, your ordinary aching Tuesday afternoon, and they evaporate because they are not in love with you. They are in love with the stimulation you provide. Real care, the kind that actually sustains a human soul, shows up in the silence. It shows up in the unremarkable moments. It shows up in someone choosing your company when there is nothing exciting happening, nothing to gain, nothing to fix. Just you. Just your ordinary, complicated, beautiful human presence. This is manipulation, and it works precisely because love makes us doubt ourselves. Love makes us ask, maybe they're right. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I'm asking for too much. But here is the truth that I want you to hold on to. Someone who loves you will be uncomfortable with your boundary and still honor it. That discomfort, that willingness to prioritize your well-being over their convenience, that is what integrity looks like. That is what care looks like. That is the standard. And it is not too much to ask. Notice who leans in when you're falling apart and leans back when you're rising. If someone is only there when there's fire, they are not your person. They are just drawn to the heat. Boundaries are not cold. They are not walls. They are not selfishness in disguise. They are the clearest, most honest thing a person can offer, a declaration of what they need in order to remain whole. And the way someone responds to your boundaries will tell you everything you need to know about whether they actually care about you. Someone who doesn't will violate those limits, casually, repeatedly, sometimes almost cheerfully. And this is the part that quietly destroys people. They will make you the villain for having had them at all. They call you difficult. They call you cold. They say you've changed, as if developing self-respect is a character flaw. They pout. They withdraw their warmth like a punishment. There are people in our lives who are most comfortable with us when we are small. When we are struggling, they are generous with attention and advice. But when we grow, when something shifts, when we step into a new version of ourselves, something changes in them. They become distant. They minimize your wins. They find subtle ways to poke holes in your progress. They ask questions that sound like support but feel like doubt. This happens because your smallness was serving something in them. Your struggle made them feel needed. Your stagnation made them feel safe. And your growth, your actual, beautiful, hard-won growth, disturbs the equilibrium they were comfortable in. People who genuinely love you want you to outgrow the version of you they met. They root for your becoming. They are not threatened by your expansion. They make more room. They celebrate louder. They say, "I always knew." And they mean it. If someone in your life seems dimmer when you are brighter, that is not jealousy to explain away. That is a signal. And you are allowed to take it seriously. This is the hardest one to admit because it feels like a confession of failure. But it may be the most important truth on this entire list. Loneliness is not only the absence of people. It can live in a crowded room. It can live in a bed you share with someone. It can live in a relationship where all the right words get said, but nothing actually reaches you. When someone doesn't truly care about you, their presence doesn't fill you. It reminds you, again and again, of what's missing. You leave their company feeling more unseen than before you arrived. You have conversations and feel unheard. You share pieces of yourself and feel unreceived. And then you go home to actual solitude, and something releases. You breathe again. You can be yourself again. Not loved when convenient. Not loved in theory. Not loved with good intentions that never quite translate into action. Loved well. Loved consistently. Loved in the ordinary moments and the messy ones. Loved with curiosity and tenderness, and the kind of steady, reliable presence that actually changes a person. That makes them feel less afraid of the world because they know they are not facing it entirely alone. You are allowed to want that. You are allowed to require it. And you are allowed, today, right now, to stop spending your precious, irreplaceable energy trying to convince someone to see your worth. Because the people who are meant for you will not need convincing. They will simply see you, and they will stay. If you are more yourself alone than with someone who is supposed to love you, that is worth sitting with. Not with judgment, not with shame, but with honest, courageous attention. Because you deserve presence that actually feels like presence. You deserve to be in a room with someone and feel less alone than you did before you walked in. So here we are, 8 signs, 8 patterns, 8 quiet ways that people tell us, not in words, but in behavior, that we are not a priority. And I want to end with this, because I think it matters more than anything else I've said. Seeing these signs, naming them clearly, is not about becoming bitter. It is not about building walls. It is not about deciding that people are fundamentally untrustworthy. It is about something far more courageous than that. It is about deciding, perhaps for the very first time, that you are worth being loved well.